Okay, DC fans, is it seriously time for another Come to Zod meeting? Yeah, it's time for another Come to Zod meeting. Buckle up. Welcome to the FliteCast, a place where opinions aren't right or wrong, and where we can agree or disagree about movies, TV, and other assorted media because it's all subjective. My name is Ray. Thank you so much for joining me. We're talking DC again. Yep, we're doing it. Seriously. I mean, we're less than a week away. We're days away from the premiere of Lanterns on HBO, which is going to be another big Sunday night HBO appointment viewing, party for the next 8 weeks or so, right? We've got James Gunn hard at work on Man of Tomorrow, and we've got fans showing their ass again. Yeah, seriously. Like, it was one thing when we were talking about MCU fanboys weaponizing Spider-Man Brand New Day's box office results against DC Studios and the DCU, but now we get to talk about how ridiculous DC fans are being again. But you know what? I'm not going to attack. Somebody on Threads the other day was like, Ray, don't attack. Yeah, I am not in the business of attacking rationality. I am in the business of attacking stupidity and toxicity, but I don't attack rationality. We're going to have a discussion, a rational discussion about the state of the DCU right now. And not necessarily the franchise, but the fandom. Because we're the ones that need to answer the important question about where we sit with respect to everything that is happening with James Gunn and DC Studios going forward. So that is what the bulk of today's show is going to be talking about. So, sorry, we're not going to, glaze over Spider-Man Brand New Day for another week. And I've got the End of Oak Street coming up, and I am going to do a flight review of that later on this week. When that releases, do you see Anne Hathaway at the press tour? My goodness. I mean, Anne Hathaway, my hat's off to her. She's had an amazing year. I know everybody's been talking about how busy of a year Zendaya has been having, and rightfully so. 4 movies, she's got Dune 3 on deck this December. But Anne Hathaway, only other actress that's been in more movies this year than she has. Mother Mary, The Devil Wears Prada 2, The Odyssey, and now The End of Oak Street, which will be her 4th of 5 movies because her 5th movie, Verity, is coming out in October. And I don't know if she's going to make that press tour because that baby bump is pretty evident now during The End of Oak Street, and that's why I'm giving her so much credit because, oh my God, seriously, to be in that condition and to get on jets and fly to premieres and answer questions and talk to the press when she probably wants to rip everybody's head off, rightfully so. Yeah, she is a trooper, my goodness. Anne Hathaway, fantastic human being, and I wish her the best. Yes, I am an Anne Hathaway fan. I can't wait to see her and Ewan McGregor in The End of Oak Street later this week. But, of course, before diving into all of the big stuff that we're talking about with DC in this show, I want to remind everybody, for those of you that are brand new to the FliteCast, you can find this show and my other shows at theflightcast.com. Right now, the podcast-only shows are this main show and Flight Chat, the listener feedback show, which did return. We did do an episode of Flight Chat the other day. Listener feedback is back and better than ever, hopefully. So hopefully we'll get some more emails and some more comments and whatnot on social media and YouTube and whatnot to get that going. A lot of fun discussions. Hopefully we can talk some more Spider-Man Brand New Day spoiler-filled stuff and talk about the MCU, because I'm not above talking about the MCU. You know that. I'm a fan of all of this stuff. But that is also, that and the main show are at theflightcast.com. As far as my other shows, like Flight Review, my movie review show, and other Flight Report, where I talked about comics, at a review of Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, and also Flight Box, which is going to make its triumphant return this upcoming week, because I am going to watch Lanterns. There's too much shit to watch, and I have a backlog of television and movies to get through, but I got to watch Lanterns. I'm going to watch Lanterns weekly. I'm going to do my best to watch it weekly and come out with some Flight Box episodes reviewing each one individually. You can find those at the FliteCast YouTube channel, which is where you might also be watching this particular episode of the FliteCast as well. YouTube.com/theflightcast. And of course, for those of you who listen in audio-only format, you can find this show on PANDORA, on Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, whatever podcatchers you use. So stay tuned for that. Also, a big thank you to all of the very loyal Patreon supporters at patreon.com/theflightcast. I have an idea, involving digital codes that I've been thinking about lately with respect to Patreon members, because I've been trying to figure out what to do with the stack of digital codes to movies that I don't need, because I got a lot of doubles like over the last year or so with a lot of the movies that I have in my physical media library here in the office. And so I've been thinking about that. Stay tuned for that if you are a member of patreon.com/theflightcast. Also, stay tuned for some other organizational changes as well, which shouldn't affect any of the current members, but it may affect new membership down the road, because, yeah, I got to revamp the Patreon. Got to do some new stuff going on for that. But thank you so much to those of you very loyal supporters of patreon.com/theflightcast. All right. So I want to start this DC discussion by reading an article. It's been a minute since I've done that, but this article I haven't got a chance to comment on. It's not a very long article. There's not a ton in it, but this was posted 5 days ago, and I'm going with Deadline because F Hollywood Reporter, can't trust them, and F Variety, really can't trust them. I am really in an untrustworthy position with the trades at this point. Deadline is the only one so far that has not given me something inflammatory or ridiculously editorial for me to, write them off. So, this particular piece from Dade Hayes, which was posted on August 6th, which many of you have already read, many of you are aware of this, but we haven't talked about it yet, or I haven't talked about it yet. The title of this piece is Superman Sequel Looks Amazing, David Zaslav says. No DC strategy shift after Supergirl misfire. Misfire might be the nicest word I've heard these trades and others use to describe Supergirl's box office. I've seen some far more inflammatory stuff on social media, but you know what? That's par for the course. Doesn't matter what regime is in charge of DC, they're always going to be the brunt of somebody's bullshit, including John Oliver on HBO. Yeah, John Oliver. This is one of those times where I wish you would stay in your political lane, buddy, but I get why you made the joke, and I get why you thought it was funny, and at the end of the day, it really doesn't make that big of a difference. But damn, I wish you would shut the hell up. We don't need you piling in on the DC hatred, but whatever. I digress. Let's get into this brief little blurb that people were talking about last week. It says, Superman sequel Man of Tomorrow seems poised to get DC back on track in 2027. Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav told Wall Street analysts Thursday. Director and DC co-chief James Gunn is focused on Man of Tomorrow, Zaslav said, when asked about any revision to DC's strategy in the wake of Supergirl. Quote, I saw some pictures yesterday that looked amazing. Actually, yesterday was James's birthday, and he's out working. He's working 16, 18 hours a day. It looks fantastic. We're super excited about it, end quote. It says here, Supergirl melted down in June. Oh, there's that editorializing again. Thank you, Deadline. Supergirl melted down in June, grossing just $126 million worldwide. The box office result dinged Warner Brothers Discovery's overall performance in the second quarter, with already difficult comparisons with Warner Brothers' stellar 2025 winding up even tougher than expected. Zaslav's background, it says here, is in the TV business, spanning long tenures in NBC and Discovery Communications prior to Warner Brothers Discovery being created via merger in 2022. As a relative newcomer to the movie business, he has frequently hyped forthcoming releases, famously telling analysts he loved The Flash in 2023. Oh, here we go with the gotchas. The gotchas on David Zaslav. I hate when trades make me defend David Zaslav's rhetoric, but whatever, this is where we're at. It's a wow, he said of the DC title, The Flash that is, but the film wound up flopping later that year. On Thursday's earnings call, the CEO also said he recently spoke with Matt Reeves, who is, quote, working very hard on the long gestating follow-up to the Batman. Oh yes, long gestating, yes, because remind all of us how long we're waiting for that particular sequel. Not that I necessarily care, because again, Batman fans have no reason to complain. I got a show full of Batman content over the last 30 to 40 years that says I should keep my damn mouth shut in terms of how long we have to wait for the Batman Part 2. Again, I digress. Back to the article. It says, with Clayface and Lanterns also on its upcoming slate, DC, quote, feels very good, Zaslav affirmed. He installed Gunn and Peter Safran as co-chairman and CEOs of DC in 2022, tasking them with improving the comic book unit. The 2025 Superman was a crowning moment for executives, along with hit series like The Penguin. Quote, we have a robust pipeline and Peter and James are hard at work, end quote, Zaslav said. Widening the lens from DC to address the overall motion picture business at Warner Brothers Discovery, Zaslav said the company will release 14 films this year, increasing to 19 in 2027. Paramount, which is aiming to acquire Warner Brothers Discovery in a $110 billion deal currently held up in antitrust litigation, has said it would guarantee at least 30 releases a year by Paramount and Warner Brothers, seeking to allay fears of a legacy major studio vanishing as part of the merger. Yeah, good luck with that. People are going to be afraid no matter what. And I don't blame them. It says, quote, "We're very confident that we're going to be able to maintain that larger number," end quote, Zaslav said of the projected 2027 increase. "We have the unique benefit of a great creative team, great relationships in the creative communities, and an enormous amount of IP." It says next year, Warner will have a new Lord of the Rings installment and Minecraft 2, along with the Batman and Superman follow-ups. Zaslav said the company is committed to our, quote, "overall philosophy of making sure that we bring the motion picture to the market when the film is ready," end quote. As a result, he observed, "We're a little light on those 10 poles. We do have Cat in the Hat coming. We got Practical Magic, and we think the back end of the year is going to be good for us. But when you compare that with what we have coming next year and the amount of tent poles, if we had to do it, we would have kind of spread those a little bit more over this year and next year," end quote. All right. So that's the gist of the piece. And that's what everybody was all agog about, and that's what I saw people commenting on, not just on Threads, but on Facebook, on TikTok, on Instagram. Everybody had some thoughts to say about this particular piece. And everybody has an agenda with where they're going, with where they're approaching this particular news from David Zaslav. All right, let's just cut to the chase here and really boil this down, okay? No agendas, okay? Yes, I'm a DC fan. Yes, what I'm saying is subjective opinion here, but I'm not trying to sell anybody on anything. Let's just look at this as officially, as fairly as we possibly can. All right. First and foremost, this was an earnings call. Yes, the media was there, but not you. This was not meant for you. Now, he knew that it was going to get to you. He knew that what he said was going to be picked up by you and probably going to be, hemmed and hawed by all of us. He knew that. But this was a call meant for the investors and everybody that has financial interests, direct financial interests in Warner Brothers, right? You know how I talk about how we shouldn't do victory laps about the box office for a movie because we're celebrating the money coming out of our wallets and going into the bank accounts of the executives? Well, these are the executives that were on that call. Right? The people that are getting richer every time we buy movie tickets or subscriptions to the apps, these are the people that he was talking to, right? So you have to take that into account when he says things like this in support of James Gunn and Peter Safran and their plan at DC Studios. He's not going to shade them. He's not going to say anything stupid or derogatory. He's going to praise them. Or at the very least, he's going to be neutral. He's going to be measured and say, well, we like this, we're confident in that. He's going to say that. Because that's the type of, that's what you need to say. That's what you're going to say as the chairman, as the person in charge, the CEO, during an earnings call. You're not going to air dirty laundry. You're not going to be all that critical. I mean, you might have some things to say, like he said, at the very end, we would have kind of spread those releases a little bit more over this year and next year. He'll say that. But he's not going to trash his people. He's not going to say, well, Supergirl was a bust and we're going to change this and we're going to do that. No, he's not going to say that in an earnings call. That is true. So when people say, well, what did you think he was going to say? Because that's what's happening now, right? You've got the people who, the anti-gun fashion, the anti-gun faction, I should say, the people that don't believe in his vision, have already written him off, think that he's doing MCU 2.0. Those individuals, unfortunately, they're just saying, well, of course, Zaslav's going to say that. Maybe he's going to turn around and sell more of his stock. He's trying to spit shine and sell this company and get the short payday. Well, yeah, they're all trying to get the short payday. You don't think any of them are doing this? Of course they're all doing this. How many CEO, look at the CEO, juggling that Disney's been doing in the last 5 years or so. Remember Bob Chapek? Remember that shit? Remember all of that with respect to, ScarJo and Emma Stone trying to sue Disney because of losses, because of their whole Premier Access thing with Black Widow and Cruella, during the pandemic. Remember that? Yeah, no, all of these companies look at the short term. The CEOs look at the short term, and they're looking for easy paydays, right? Chapek was looking for an easy payday. Iger looks for easy payday. They all look for easy paydays. So let's stop acting like the people, like David Zaslav is so different than, whoever's in charge of Disney or whoever's in charge of Paramount or whoever's in charge of Universal. They're all the same. And they're not us. They're not working class individuals. So they're going to say things that are definitely going to be spun for their own investors. They're going to say things that are definitely going to be spun for their own benefit, no matter what. Now, here's the thing that I think everybody should remember, is that just because what they're saying is spin doesn't mean that the spin can't also benefit us, the fans. There is a weird world, because of how corporately entrenched the world that we live in is. There's a weird place where corporate speak actually can benefit us at times. Not always, but at times it can benefit our sentimentalities as fans. Because here's the thing. You know good and damn well that something like this, an article that, David Zaslav and his support of James Gunn and Peter Safran, you know good and damn well Kevin Tsujihara wouldn't have said shit 10 years ago. He didn't say shit 10 years ago. There was no rousing support. There wasn't even rousing support from the people that were in charge of DC Films, right? Remember that whole dipsy doodle, Justice League disaster? That was on the watch of Jeff Johns and John Berg. Sorry, Phil, I know you hate when I say his name, but I have to point it out because there was no support, right? This is a polar opposite situation 10 years later with respect to DC Films versus DC Studios. Because in the DC Films era, the rug was pulled out from under Zack Snyder and David Ayer with respect to BVS and the final theatrical cut, with respect to Suicide Squad and its final theatrical cut, and certainly with Justice League and all the reshoots that total over $300 million with respect to shooting a damn film twice and then releasing the Whedonized, lazy, bland version for all of us to ingest unnaturally back in November of 2017, right? All of that was the reaction that I think people, weirdly enough, fans are expecting. And I brought this up before. I said, so let me get this straight, guys. You were so mistrusting of James Gunn and Peter Safran's direction that you want them to do the exact same thing that Johns and Berg did 10 years ago. You want them to course correct. You want them to change and move away from their current plan. A plan which, by the way, goes for the next, 8 years? 8 to 10 years, right? Like, they had to lay this out. Like, we were told this, right? Regardless of what you believe or not, there were insiders, people that signed NDAs that said, we know where they're going with this, we can't disclose it. Okay, fair enough. And yeah, sure, you keep harping on, all right, they're not doing Booster Gold, they're not doing The Authority, they're not doing this, they're not doing that. Well, yeah, shit changes, obviously, as things develop, because some writers are going to get further ahead than others. Some projects are going to get further ahead than others. This is why none of the studios should ever announce slates, because as soon as they announce a slate, you get in your feelings when things don't go the way that they're supposed to, and a project that you were anticipating doesn't end up happening. And I get it as a fan, but that's also why you should keep your expectations level set. But we're fans, we don't do that. But the ultimate point that I'm making here is that just because David Zaslav is like essentially coach speaking with respect to what he's saying about the earnings call supporting DC Studios doesn't mean that isn't to our benefit. It literally means he's remaining hands off on DC Studios. It's not like he's telling the investors one thing and then doing something else. No, he's leaving them alone. He is leaving them alone because right now they're in a period of transition. And this isn't just a case of him trying to sell Warner Brothers and get his quick payday. I mean, that's a big motivator for him. It's probably the primary motivator for him. But it doesn't make sense for him, because of that, to make any drastic changes whatsoever, even if you want him to. I know there are probably some of you out there that do not like the direction that the DCU is going. You don't like that it started with Superman and Supergirl. You don't like that it's Clayface in October after we get Lanterns in a couple of days. You don't like that Man of Tomorrow is coming up before we get to any type of Wonder Woman or Batman film. You don't like that there's a Jimmy Olsen show. You really don't like there's a Jimmy Olsen show coming, right? Like, I get it. You can feel however you want subjectively about the plan, but I talk about this all the time. You need to decide whether or not you're good with creative freedom, because that's what we have right now. You've got Gunn and you've got Safran in charge, and the creative freedom that they're being afforded for whatever reason by David Zaslav. It does not matter what the reason is. At the end of the day, it's always money, right? It's always money. When you get the people that talk about, well, it's still a business, right? Whenever somebody makes a marketing argument or a corporatist argument about these movies and about these shows and about what they should do, they always come back to the statement of, it's still a business. Yes, we know that, asshole. We know it's still a business. That's not what we're talking about here. The business is already there. It's already inherent. The problem is people, fans in general, have a really bad time of dismissing the business when they feel like it and adding it when it supports their point. And this is why I talk about narratives and why everybody has narratives about what they want to see happen. The anti-gun people want to see this crash and burn. They want to see it fail. They want to see James Gunn not renew his contract and walk away. They want the DCU poofed. They want it blown up. And I know this. They've told me this. There was a guy who was following me on TikTok, and the thing is, he follows me on TikTok. I'm like, oh, okay, cool, because I forget what post that he liked. I followed him back. And then I start seeing a whole bunch of like anti-gun posts and talking about how he's not going to be in charge of DC after the merger happens, and how that's a good thing, and he's not doing this. It's like, why? What are we doing here? Like, what's going on? Well, because he's got a narrative. He doesn't like the direction that they're going in, and he wants to go in a different direction. So he's glomming onto this whole Zaslav thing and just calling it PR speak. Okay, it is PR speak, but it's PR speak to our benefit, at least to the benefit of somebody that actually wants to see DC succeed. And not all of you want to see DC succeed. That's the truth. Not every fan wants to see, not every DC fan, or those that claim to be DC fans, want to see DC succeed. But you can best believe that David Zaslav is remaining hands-off. He has no other choice at this point. They're in the middle of filming Man of Tomorrow, and it is in David Zaslav's best interest for Man of Tomorrow to succeed. It is not in his best interest for it to fail, because if it does, then selling Warner Brothers Discovery is going to be a more difficult proposition for him. It is, right? It's already a difficult proposition now. We do not know what is going to happen with this antitrust case. You can claim that you do, and you can hit the easy button and say, well, it's politics. It's clearly going to go this way. You can do that if you want. But the reality of the situation is we've been living in unprecedented times for the last 10 years at least. So you really want to hitch your wagon to this idea? You really want to be that solvent on it? I don't know. The merger could go through. It may not. The point is we're not going to know for certain until, what, March at the earliest? That's when they're going to hear the case, March of 2027. So that means that a couple of months before Man of Tomorrow releases is when we might hear some finalization. So what are they going to do, pull the plug? What are they going to fire a gun and be like, oh, no. They need him to do press. They need him to hype it up. They need him to do his job because they still need DC Studios to succeed. They're not going to pull the rug out from under him because they are mutually assured not to do so. Okay? Has nothing to do with placating us fans, has nothing to do with doing what we want, has nothing to do with making us happy, has everything to do with satisfying their payday. And Man of Tomorrow failing does not satisfy their payday. So this is where their corporate interests benefits us as the fan. Those of us that want Man of Tomorrow to succeed, that is. Those of us that don't want Man of Tomorrow to succeed, well, no, that's bad news for you. Because you want David Zaslav to knee-jerk. You want him to fire James Gunn and hire a Kevin Feige clone. Or no, I'm sorry. There are many of you... This is the other thing I don't get about fans. Is, with DC fans in particular, y'all can't figure out what it is that you hate James Gunn for. Do you not like him because he's not focusing on the Trinity first? Or do you not like him because he's turning the franchise into MCU 2.0? What is the reason? It might be both. But either way, I find that hypocritical because he is literally, like, the fact that he is not doing the Trinity, the fact that we don't have a Wonder Woman movie or a Batman movie officially greenlit yet, we don't have those actors officially cast yet, the fact that he's doing essentially the Superman saga, and the first 4 films of the DCU will have been Superman, Supergirl, Clayface, and Man of Tomorrow. Three of the first 4 movies in the DCU will have been Kryptonian centered. That is literally anti-MCU. Because what was the first 4 movies of the MCU? Yeah, there were 2 Iron Man movies, but there was an Incredible Hulk movie and a Thor movie, okay? And then the 5th movie was Captain America. I don't know what the 5th movie of the DCU is going to be just yet. We'll find out, right? And never mind television, because you throw Peacemaker Season 2 in there, you throw Creature Commandos in there, you throw Lanterns in there, right? So it's like, this is literally taking a structure that is not the MCU. So the idea that you're calling this MCU 2.0 because of the jokes and because of the humor and because you think he made Superman look like a ditz, what the hell? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. But it's either that, or you think he's doing anti-MCU in the wrong fashion because you think he should be focused on the Trinity. You think he should be doing a Batman movie. You think he should be doing Wonder Woman. In which case, you kind of want MCU 2.0 because you want him to just establish the Justice League. And I keep hearing that from people. He needs to establish the Justice League. Why? Why does he need to do that? The last franchise already did a Justice League movie, whether you like it or not. I have it on my shelf. The good one. The real one. Zack Snyder's Justice League. Why would James Gunn try to replicate the exact same formula here? Because it's a business, and they've got to stop right there. Stop right there. It's a business to Warner Brothers Discovery and their shareholders. It's not a business to us. It's not. It's a fandom to us. It's a franchise to us. It's us wearing our hearts on our sleeves for our favorite heroes to us. It is not a business to us. You are not a shareholder of Warner Brothers Discovery. If you are, then I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to all the fans that want to spout their nonsense and immediately fall under the guise of it's a business when it supports their point. No, screw that. Absolutely not. The fact of the matter is, it is in the best interest of David Zaslav and everybody at Warner Brothers Discovery for Man of Tomorrow to succeed and for DC Studios to continue the DCU plan. It is in their best interest for James Gunn and Peter Safran to succeed, not to fail. So this isn't just about him glossing them, glazing them rather in an earnings call so that he looks good. He literally needs them to succeed. He literally needs them to be on the up and up. Like, Man of Tomorrow has to succeed. It does. Like, this is the linchpin, if you will. Like I said, it's not Clayface, okay, and it's not even the notoriety that they're going to get from Lanterns, and they're going to get some time. History has shown us, not just the history of HBO, but the history of DC shows on HBO, whether it's Watchmen, Peacemaker, or The Penguin. Like, those shows generate buzz, generate attention. People talk about that. I mean, if you get any inkling whatsoever that they're connected to the movies, which the audience will when they see Nathan Fillion in episodes of the show, along with Kyle Chandler and Aaron Pierre as Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart. When they see Guy Gardner that they just saw in Superman and maybe Peacemaker Season 2, they're gonna go, oh hey, alright, there it is, right? Like, it is in their best interest for it to succeed. So if you're out there dismissing what Zaslav is saying, I think that's a bad idea. I think that's a mistake on your part. I think that you should be looking at what he's saying as mutual interests aligned. He wants the payday, and it is in his best interest for the DCU to continue for him to get his payday. Period. And this is regardless of the merger. But here's another thing. Another thing that people I don't think realize, another thing that some DC fans I don't think realize, is you want to get all squirrely about what the merger could do for James Gunn. And the reality of the situation, and I've heard this too, right? I've heard how, the Ellisons and Paramount, when they get a hold of it, they're going to radically change the DCU. They're going to fire Gunn and Safran, and they're going to get rid of all the woke crap. Really? You think so? You really think that it would be in the best interest of the new ownership, should it occur? Because, again, we don't know if it's going to occur or not. But you really think that it would make financial and logistical sense to shareholders to jettison the people that are currently, that have a plan. And, as Zaslav says, robust. He told the investors that it's a robust plan. The fact of the matter is, whether you think it's actually robust, it still exists. It's still an actual plan. Gunn and Safran have indicated to us that they've built that. That was how they got the job in the first place 3 or 4 years ago, right? You think the new owners are going to just swoop in and toss that plan to the wind in favor of what? And what is the alternative as far as content creation? Where are they going to get those movies, right? If they're trying to smooze, they're trying to schmooze the exhibitors, and allay fears of, hey, the theatrical production is not going to decrease as a result of our merger. But why would you eliminate the DC studio schedule? Why would you tell them, well, no, we're not going to do all of this. We're going to tighten the purse strings. No, you're going to have to spend money in some form, and DC is the closest you've got to being able to reach Marvel money. You are not at a point yet as a franchise where any of your movies can yet command $1 billion. However, The Man of Tomorrow could be the first. It could very well be the first film that does that in your franchise. And if it is, then that's all the more reason why you wouldn't jettison Gunn and Safran whatsoever, whoever is in charge, whether it remains David Zaslav or whether it becomes David Ellison. Money is the end-all be-all here. Follow the greed, everybody. Greed is not a great thing whatsoever for a number of reasons. But again, we live in such a corporately entwined world that sometimes the greed can benefit us. Here, I'll tell you what. From a socioeconomic standpoint, here's how greed has benefited us as humans in the last 6 years. Greed is literally what got us COVID-19 vaccines. I'm not even joking with you. Like, I'm going a little socioeconomic here just to make this point, but I said this in 2020 when everybody was holed up and work from home and stay at home and all that stuff. I told my mom, I told my sisters over FaceTime and Zoom calls. I said, listen, we're going to have 2 or 3 vaccines either by the end of 2020 or by the beginning of 2021 because they need everybody to go back to offices. They need everybody to go back to work. They can't be shut down for this stretch of time. They're losing billions of dollars. They need everybody functional and getting back to work. And lo and behold, what happened? What happened? The greed literally pushed everything through and got us to a point. And I don't give a shit if you believe in vaccinations or not. I'm only making this point to show you that greed is what ultimately matters more than politics to these people. At the end of the day, whoever is in charge of Warner Brothers Discovery is going to want the dollars. They're going to want the big money. And scrapping everything in the middle with whatever James Gunn and Peter Safran's long-term plan is a stupid idea. It's a dumber idea than what Warner Brothers did with Justice League. It is. It's dumber than that idea, to be honest with you. Because that idea was, trying to chase Marvel Studios' success quickly. Which it sounds like DC fans want David Zaslav and DC Studios to do now. Because they get all squirrely about Spider-Man making, on track for $2 billion. It's Spider-Man, for crying out. It's Spider-Man. Like, what other solo heroes can do that by themselves? Has any other solo hero done that by himself? No, certainly not. If anybody could, right, Spider-Man is the one in this regard. So why we're comparing that, it doesn't make any sense to me. But, no, guys, look, the consternation that you might have with respect to David Zaslav's words here, I think, is short-sighted and unfounded. I'm not saying you got to trust everything David Zaslav says. No, I'm not saying trust anything that he says. Trust his greed, though. Trust his chasing of the dollars. Trust his need to see this deal go through, right? And the deal going through is dependent upon DC Studios' success, whether you believe that or not. It is dependent on that. And there is a pathway for DC Studios to absolutely have this success next year. Addressing all the people that think that Supergirl all of a sudden is just going to torpedo whatever hype for Man of Tomorrow. Why? Why would it do that? Why would anything with that movie torpedo any hype from what David Cornswet and Rachel Brosnahan and company established last year in Superman? Why? No, you already know that Man of Tomorrow likely will be more critically acclaimed. I mean, it's Superman, right? And remember, there was this push. People wanted to go back to a brighter Superman, a more hopeful Superman, a more colorful Superman because they didn't watch Man of Steel properly, but that's on them. Point is, they seemingly got that in 2025. Why would they soundly reject it in 2027 just because they didn't necessarily care or watch Supergirl in 2026? That makes absolutely no flippin' sense whatsoever. So no, Man of Tomorrow is going to have its own hype. And it's going to come from the Superman movie. And then, as I also said, the people that are glomming onto Supergirl and forming her new fan base now will also go to see that movie and see what she does in that movie. And that's apart from anybody else that they put into the movie. So, look, there are a number of logical reasons without any type of agenda to see where the road could take DC Studios and the DCU, right? There's a road where it could fail, right? But it all hinges on Man of Tomorrow is the ultimate point here. Man of Tomorrow is the linchpin of all this. And that's where the first sentence of this article is true. Superman sequel, Man of Tomorrow, seems poised to get DC back on track in 2027. Yes, it does seem poised for that because Supergirl is not going to affect it. It's going to build off of hype from Superman last year and from anything else, like Green Lanterns or whatnot enjoyable that is attached to it, right? And if Man of Tomorrow succeeds, then DC Studios and the DCU will continue. It will. Seriously. Because that's what they're hinging on. That's what they're banking on. That's what everybody is aligned with. And it does not matter if you like Gunn's direction or not. It does not matter if you like the direction of DC Studios and the DCU or not. The fact of the matter is, David Zaslav, while he couldn't probably care less about any of you as fans, ultimately does care about his ability to close this deal. And DC Studios must succeed for him to close his deal. Period. So any arguments people want to talk about, the deal's going to happen anyway. Really? You think so? What are the shareholders going to do? What about the stock prices? That's the other thing about these earnings calls, right? Earnings calls, depending on what information is revealed, can raise, keep level, or drop stock prices. It can affect the stock market in that sense. You really think the shareholders want their stocks to plummet because Man of Tomorrow did this or DC Studios did that? No. No, it is in their best interest to succeed. It is absolutely in their best interest and our best interest as fans who want to see the DCU succeed. It's a mutually assured, success rate, if you will. Okay? Two separate interests, one aligned by money, the other aligned by creative direction, that are temporarily aligned. They're not always aligned, but in this case, they most certainly are. That's why it makes sense for Zaslav to keep his hands off of what Safran and Gunn are doing, let Man of Tomorrow develop. And that's also why, like I was telling Brent in his question that he asked on Flight Chat, that's also why, we're not seeing, a quick resolution to Gunn's contract being re-signed, right? And that's another thing that the haters want to tell you is Gunn's contract is up in the spring, so, clearly the writing's on the wall. He's not going to be in charge. That's what there's so much hopium right now. And it's negative hopium, and that's what pisses me off, is that it's negative hopium being pushed out there. Like all these DC fans, these so-called DC fans, and yes, I am going to call them so-called DC fans, because what kind of DC fan roots against a particular creative decision? No. Here's the thing. If you're a DC fan and you don't appreciate James Gunn's direction, you don't appreciate what he's doing for the franchise, then your proper response is to keep your mouth shut and walk away. Say nothing, pay attention to nothing, and go about your business and live your life as though the DCU and DC Studios does not exist. And then, when they do something that you do like, that you do appreciate, then come back and speak on that. But otherwise, you're just being a toxic little bitch, and you're not helping anybody with all of your negative rhetoric and hoping for failure. Who roots for failure for your favorite comic book characters? Who does that? Why? No rational individual does that. And you are just as bad as the anti-Snyder cult, if this is what you're doing. Remember 10 years ago, right? I feel like a lot of this year so far, 2026, as far as nerd circles, I feel like a lot of it is history being doomed to repeat itself, but in a ironic fashion, right? In 2016, you had comic creators, you had critics, you had fanboys that were just trashing Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice left and right, calling Snyder's work the Murderverse. DC is too serious and too dark and, not for kids, and scary and horrible, and it should be changed and should be funny and happier, and Marvel is the model of what everything should be, right? That's what people were saying in 2016, and that is what literally birthed the Snyder cult. Now, 10 years later, people that are upset with Gunn are saying similar things, only in reverse. Oh, it's too unserious, and he's focusing on characters nobody cares about, and he's nepotism, and he's doing what he wants, and he doesn't understand that this is what the general audience is looking for, and he needs to pivot and make it different. Basically, you're saying he needs to do what you want him to do, which is exactly what the anti-Snyder cult said 10 years ago. Zack Snyder needs to do what they want him to do and give them world's finest instead of BVS. You are now saying the same thing about James Gunn in reverse. F off. absolutely F off. I'm being completely serious about that. If that is your tone, F off. I absolutely 100% question your DC fandom if that is your position. Because, man, is that hypocritical. Incredibly, utterly hypocritical to take that position after being bullied by it, after feeling disenfranchised by it 10 years ago, right? Those of you that have been part of the Snyderverse movement, those of you that have been champions of Zack Snyder's work, those of you who were part of Release the Snyder Cut, as I was, right? All of that was because you wanted to see Zack Snyder's creative vision finally fulfilled. You wanted that creative freedom granted to him, but then turn around 10 years later and you don't want it granted. You want it taken away from James Gunn. You want him to lose his job. You want him to get kicked out. You want the vision to fail. Disgusting, in my opinion. Utterly disgusting. It's literally the epitome of if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. That's the responsible thing to do. That's the rational thing to do as an adult. But so many fans do not act like adults, especially when they don't get their way. They turn into the crybaby temper tantrum meme, that gets, and the gif that gets shared all the time on social media. It's ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. And that's where we're at, unfortunately. And it doesn't surprise me because on cue, as though it's like part of Death in Texas. It's like there's death in Texas and DC getting raked over the coals by its own fans. Fans, in air quotes, that you can only see if you're watching this on YouTube. Like, what are we doing here? What is this? You don't have to like it. You don't have to like Superman. I know, Phil, you don't like Superman. I get it. You don't have to like Supergirl. I'm sure there are plenty of you that don't like that film. Whatever. You don't have to like Peacemaker. Don't have to like Lanterns in a couple of days, although I feel like a lot of people are going to like it, but we'll see, because there's going to be the boo birds that are going to complain about there's not enough green and it's not cosmic enough and there's not the costume looks silly and the Ryan Reynolds film was better. There's going to be some assholes that say that. Of course there are, because again, it all boils down to that one sentence that fans always come back to with their complaints. They didn't do what I wanted them to do. That's all it is. Whining that incessantly. They didn't do what you wanted them to do. Suck it up. That's all I gotta say with respect to that. Suck it up and move on. If it's not what you want, then move on to what you do want somewhere else and leave the rest of us in relative peace. Those of us that actually do enjoy it, those of us that actually do have an open mind for whatever they're going to present to us in this fashion. Oy vey. This turned into a rant, but that's what I do. I rant a lot of times with respect to fandoms. And it's very easy to rant about the DC fandom because they do stupid shit all the time. DC fans do stupid things and say stupid shit all the time. On social media, on TikTok, on YouTube, they say stupid shit all the time. It happens on a regular basis. And when I see people rooting against James Gunn, rooting against Peter Safran, rooting against DC Studios, and I go, why? Because they didn't do what I wanted them to do. That's all I hear. That's all it sounds like. There is no logistical other reason for it. Okay? They're not doing anything objectively wrong, because there's no such thing. They're making their decisions and trusting their own decisions as creatives. And right now, their boss is saying, keep going. Right now, their boss is publicly saying, go ahead, proceed. He's not doing it because he believes in their vision. He's not doing it because he believes in your satisfaction. He's doing it because he wants his payday. And it is in his best interest for Peter Safran and James Gunn to succeed with DC Studios and the DCU to satisfy David Zaslav and also David Ellison's ultimate vision. The success of DC Studios is paramount, pun intended, to the success of these studio owners, whoever is in charge of it. It is, most certainly. And that is something that is not, an agenda. That is not any type of pro this or pro that. It's just fact, guys. These studio heads don't want shit to fail, right? You think they're so quick to just, toss things aside, to toss away cash cows for personal or political reasons. When at the end of the day, that dollar, that almighty dollar is what rules all of their decisions, short term and long term, for any of them that think that way. And so that's where we're at with this. this particular decision, this particular support that DC Studios is getting is money driven, because their success means his success, period. And it's the one time, one of the few times, that the short-term greedy goals of a CEO or a couple of CEOs align with what we might want for success, right? We want James Gunn, those of us rational individuals that are happy with the DCU and are willing to see where James Gunn and Peter Safran take us going forward, we want to see their creative vision respected in a way that Zack Snyder's never was. We want that, right? Like, I want that, okay? The hypocrites out there that, wanted it for Snyder but don't want it for Gunn, okay, you sit in the corner. You do not make the fan base look good. You are toxic to the fan base. You're just as toxic as the anti-Snyders, the ones who didn't want creative freedom for Zack Snyder but certainly want it for James Gunn, right? And then you got the in-between, who just, the people that don't want creative freedom for anybody, but they're not, they don't have the stones to reveal that to everybody else. They don't have the stones to just admit that that's how they feel about it. The ultimate corporatists, if you will, in that regard. No, whatever. It's ridiculous. And so it's definitely rant-worthy in that regard. And, as I get older, I don't yell as much as I used to on my rants, but I definitely have some strong points to make, especially when I see fan behavior that just looks ridiculous and, bitterly ironic. I don't get it. No, never mind. I do get it. I know the selfishness. It bugs me. It's the only thing that bugs me, right? There are 1,000 things. I can go through Superman if I want to and tell you, certain things that I may not have cared for in the movie. I don't really give a shit, because it's, that and Man of Steel are my 1A and 1B Superman movies, right? I could tell you, okay, I see where some complaints about Supergirl are coming from, even though I don't agree with them. That really doesn't matter to me in that regard, because at the end of the day, I'm just going, all right, let's see where the franchise takes us. Let's see where the direction is going. I'm willing to look at that. I'm willing to go in that direction. And not everybody is. Certainly within fandoms. Not everybody is willing to do that. But you know what? It's all hinging on Man of Tomorrow. Man of Tomorrow is it. It's not necessarily the Alamo, but it's the big one. It's the big one, the big film, the big project that is going to determine how much further the DCU goes, how much further James Gunn and Peter Safran are going to go. And I tell you what, if James Gunn and Peter Safran really want to keep doing this, if they really want this to continue forward, then they're going to put their all into Man of Tomorrow. And being the studio heads, and with Zaslav remaining hands off for his own interests, that we can be confidently assured that what we see on July 9th, 2027 is what James Gunn and Peter Safran absolutely wish to present to us, with everybody else involved. And at the end of the day, I'm looking more forward to that than any of this other nonsense that people are interested in terms of speculation, in terms of, well, this is going to happen or that's going to happen. And again, it doesn't matter what regime it is, there's always going to be DC fans showing their ass. Always. It's always going to be the case. And it's unfortunate. I don't like, necessarily focusing on it, but it is something that I want to address, because I'm tired of negativity. I'm tired of negativity in general, with respect to any of these franchises, but certainly with DC. We've had more than enough of it. We've had our fill of it in the last decade. Now we get more? Really? No, thank you. Absolutely not. So, this area, the FliteCast, will remain an area that is going to be at least cautiously optimistic about the future of the DCU and DC Studios. I'm very much looking forward to Lanterns, and I am also looking forward to Clayface, especially with the great resurgence, the great year that smaller budget horror movies have had this year, like Backrooms and Obsession. I'm looking forward to Clayface. I am very curious to see what that does in October, and certainly I'm looking forward to Man of Tomorrow, right? And the Batman Part 2, part of the Batman epic crime saga. Yeah, all that success I'm looking forward to, because at the end of the day, I'm a rational DC fan that is not rooting against James Gunn or anybody else at DC Studios. That's just the long and short of it. And hey, you can sit on whatever side of the fence that you want, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. The DCU is solvent through Man of Tomorrow. And then once that film releases and we see what it does to the general public, then we'll see where it goes from there, right? But that's where it is. That's where we're at with it. So there's really not much more I can say on that. And I feel like that's the crux of today's show. if you will. It's just getting some thoughts out with respect to the David Zaslav support and what it really means and why people need to not dismiss it and look at it from not necessarily an objective standpoint, but look at it from a rational and fair standpoint. Not with agendas behind it. Look at what they are motivated to do and look at how it can temporarily align with our interests as fans. Those of us, again, that are DC fans that want to see the DCU and DC Studios succeed. So, with that in mind, I think that'll do it for this particular ranty episode of the FliteCast. Not the first rant I've done, and certainly won't be the last. There'll be some more shit with fans to talk about. But thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching here on YouTube. For those of you that are watching on the YouTube channel, we can rap about this, guys. The feedback show is back in effect. We're going to do it weekly as best as we can. So if you've got some thoughts with respect to where you're at with DC Studios and where you're at with James Gunn and Peter Safran, we can continue this conversation without a doubt. Of course, I still want to hear some people's thoughts on Spider-Man Brand New Day. Some more reviews from those of you that have seen it. But hey, we can talk DC. We can always talk DC. So if you've got any thoughts on anything that I had to say or rant about in this particular episode, if you have a different angle on David Zaslav and the like that I haven't necessarily brought up, you know where to find me on Threads and on Instagram at the FliteCast, on Blue Sky at FliteCast. There's also the FliteCast Facebook page, and of course I can be reached by email at ray@theflightcast.com. All right, on that note, take care, stay safe out there, have a great rest of the week, and I will see you all next time. Take it easy.